Hi and welcome, and thanks for tuning in for episode 2 of the FODs, the future of digital commerce. Season 4 is all about the move to composable architecture and how you can navigate some of the pitfalls before you come across them. As you know, no two composable transformations are the same. I hope you all enjoyed episode 1 with Anjali, former DXE architect for Very Group. There were some really good insights shared, particularly around digital maturity within the business. Here we are with today's guest, Craig McLaren. Craig is currently head of digital for MKM Building Supplies, a business not everyone may have heard of. However, one that has gone through substantial change over the last 18 months, of which Craig has spearheaded. Tell the audience a bit more, Craig.
Thanks, James, and thanks for the opportunity to come on. I think we, as MKM as a business, we're the UK's leading independent builders merchants. Established in 1995 by David Kilburn and partners, and in effect, the business has kind of gone from strength to strength, and especially in the last kind of 2 to 3 years, and even in my time here, we've grown from about 75 branches and now sitting at 110, and we continue to grow. Unique business model. So you have a couple of branch directors in every branch, and they've got a lot of flexibility in how they want to run their business for the local markets, and that's kind of how we establish ourselves. A really interesting, cool business. And I joined in 2021 in the June, so nearly 2 years in the business. And as you said, kind of there as head of digital, started off as head of programs, what we called it. So we're running a major re-platform to replace our existing or previous website, which was going to end of life. So it was a burning platform. And it was one of the reasons I took the role through Andy Pickup, who I worked with previously. I've been there 2 years. We've re-platformed, and I'm not saying any more just now.
Okay, so you mentioned that the challenge of the re-platform itself, alongside the structure of the business, were two of the main reasons for taking the position with MKM Building Supplies, and obviously the re-platform is something that we will focus on specifically, given the theme of the series of the podcast. Talk us through a little bit more about the technology that you were on, and I guess more importantly, the technology that you chose to move towards.
Yeah, so I think there was a real mix of the tech stack that we had, and I think it'd been built over a period of 9 or 10 years and kind of added to and bits taken out. I think it ended up with a kind of server setup with a kind of Mobify front end, and I think there's probably some screen scraping going on in some of the architecture there as well. So one of the key products was going end of life. It was legacy and it wasn't going to be supported anymore. So we would have to do a major upgrade, but it gave us a real opportunity to kind of strip the whole site out and kind of start from scratch. So we picked a combination of Bloomreach for search and CMS and our engagement as well for all our automated marketing, and we picked BigCommerce, mainly for obviously the ordering and checkout function, and we hooked up to our existing kind of payment platform as well. And then amongst all of that, to try and simplify the front end and get to market quicker, we were recommended to work with View Storefront. So that was another combination. We came to agreement with these guys as well, and kind of all three products kind of merged together in a composable setup to talk to our Carriage K ERP system. So I think we are the world's first to kind of certainly combine Bloomreach, BigCommerce, and View Storefront together as a stack.
Nice, and then I think that's really interesting that you highlight that as well. And I mean, I know from other conversations that you're very happy with how things have panned out, and I guess we'll talk about that in a bit more detail later on during the show. But I guess what would be really useful for the audience to understand is looking at the challenges presented to you in your role at MKM. What would you say probably was one or two of the biggest challenges you had to overcome?
So I think one of the challenges, I don't say it was the biggest one to overcome, but I think it's kind of moving what I would say is a bricks and mortar business, into, more of a kind of mature digital landscape. At the end of the day, we're a business there that the customers go into branch. We're not trying to break that or take that away. That is the core of our business. And when you had a previous website that probably wasn't taken seriously, it didn't work very well. It would take 15 seconds to check out. It would fail 5 times while you were trying to check out. So no wonder a lot of our customers and our branches didn't like the web and didn't really invest in it. I think now, I think taking that through a burning platform and having a year to do it, it certainly brought a lot of the business functions together because we knew we had to do it, and it was a brilliant collaborative effort across Central Support and our branches, input from them. We couldn't have done it without the rest of the functions in the branches, that it kind of drove us over the line. And I think as the business matures, and I'm not going to go into revenue figures and so on, but we are seeing a massive upturn on our online revenue because we've got a site that actually kind of works a lot better, looks and feels a lot better than the previous one, and is certainly a lot more stable. So I think the challenges one was the time scale. We had to really do it in a year, but that was the challenge because it focuses everybody's attention. And I think just getting everybody and managing stakeholders to get it over the line when the previous product wasn't that great. So it's just kind of changing hearts and minds as we've gone, and that's organically already happened during the project, but more so now that we're seeing certainly an upturn on online sales as a result of the new website going live.
Yeah, so I think the whole uptake issue is certainly a big thing to overcome. I think when you have any form of transformation that requires users to have a change in process and a change in technology and everything else, it can be challenging, particularly for those that have maybe been there for a long time and they're very much set in their ways.
Yeah, I think, and to be fair to my team, the business and everybody, is that what we decided to do is, and they would absolutely do the same again, is we took an MVP approach. What we didn't want to do was go live and change lots of the business processes, change all the branches' processes, and upset the way the business worked. It was the last thing we wanted to do. What we needed to do was to get live simply, quickly, and kind of stable. And we achieved that. I mean, we did face a big challenge, as lots of technology projects do. I mean, I don't know what the rate of failure is in IT projects. I've had it quoted to me many times. But, pulling together these kind of 3 systems with our ERP, nothing's plain sailing in whatever project you do. And we hit a moment probably halfway through where we had to refactor probably the middle layer in what was called a private back end. It's kind of developed into kind of customization of pulling all the products together, but allowing all the systems to talk to each other with our ERP. So it's about getting the plumbing and the wiring right. And we didn't get it right. But to be fair to our system integrator, Brave Bison, who were integral to this, to getting us through all of this, because we built our own kind of digital team as we went through the project. So, we didn't have all the devs on the ground at the start. We didn't have UX and everybody on the ground at the start. We did actually have one UX resource, business analyst, but we grew that product owner, Scrum Master, a couple of our own devs. So through the whole program, we actually built our own team as well. So we kind of supported each other with our SI, Brave Bison, and we worked hand in hand, and we're still working with these guys today. We do some of the work, they do some of the work, and there's lots of good handover and collaboration. But they put their hands up, in the middle of the project that we're going to have to refactor, or we would have a lot of technical debt. Technically, we could have probably got live, but it was the right decision to refactor. And I'm not surprised. It's the world's first implementation. I think there's a lot of learnings have gone on it, but we still did it on time. Nobody fell out, and everybody kind of worked together brilliantly, to be perfectly honest with you. So that probably the challenges is kind of making sure you take the business on the journey with you and have a really good setup of kind of platform providers that are prepared to work with each other and work with you when you've got serious issues. In Bloomreach, Big Commerce, Brave Bison, View Storefront, they all work together to get the plumbing right.
Nice. Yes. I mean, you obviously covered a lot of points there. One thing you mentioned, though, was the fact that you started off, you didn't have any form of internal team, and that is something that you built over the course of the project going on in the background. How did you find going around that, and how did you find then integrating that team into the project with such tight deadlines?
Yeah, I mean, it was tough, but when I look back, it, it wasn't super tough because we set from the mindset from the start, and with our SI and all the partners, they knew we were going to build our own internal team. So there was no surprises. And to be fair, they actually helped us do it. They were involved in some of the interviews, CV reviews, and so on. So I think if you build that partnership, there's then no surprises with your suppliers, and they're not pushing back on you either because you've got your own resources. But I think we had a few really key resources in at the start. We had our business analyst there. We had our lead UX there. So they were two key roles we had really early on. Then I joined shortly after that. Then we kind of added another UX resource. We added a product owner. We added a Scrum Master. And then we started to add a couple of our own devs. So we did that through just naturally through that time. But the great thing about it is the SI was kind of leading on a lot of these key roles anyway, and they worked with us flexibly to kind of swap people out as we went, but we never made any massive changes through the program to keep it consistent. We've probably made a number of changes since we've gone live and we've got stability. But a good SI partner is usually with you after you've gone live, and we've been live for 6 months, so we've got a really nice hybrid model that you can flex up and down.
Awesome. You mentioned you've been live for 6 months, and you obviously went on the MVP route. How quickly did you go from start to finish to get the initial website live?
Yeah, actually, maybe I'm losing track of time. I think we've actually been live for nearly, I think, 7 going into 8 months now. Actually, kind of round it down to 6, but yeah, timescales. I think start to finish. I think we started on the RFP process in the June. We had gone through that whole process. And actually had started our main discovery phase in September of that year. So we went very quickly from the end of June through July, August, did all the commercials, and a lot of great partners work with you while you're still refining your contracts. And we started a kind of good fixed kind of phase, discovery phase. So once you've done an RFP, my recommendation is make sure you then have a set of workshops, especially if you're doing a big re-platform. Do a bit of traditional analysis through, a number of weeks and months to make sure all parties actually understand the requirements. And that probably reduces the risk of the surprises later on. So you can kind of merge the waterfall and kind of agile worlds, because we then moved into sprints after that. And we found with a kind of nice wee waterfall approach for discovery, then you kind of set that in stone. You got your scope agreed as best as you can, and then we moved into sprints all the way until we kind of moved more into like a system integration test phase and a UAT test phase, because we were doing a big bang deployment, so we were able to structure the program in that way.
Okay.
So yeah, you're probably talking just over a year, which isn't too bad for something that's not these products and companies all hooked together for the first time. That's not bad going, but a date does focus you.
Yeah, and look, I mean, you hear about these re-platforms and other implementations that can happen in a matter of months, but reality is there's not a huge amount of complexity to them. You also hear about ones that drag on for years and years and years and don't really seem to go anywhere either. So I think a year is pretty good going to get what needs to get done and to have the success that you guys have had off the back of it as well.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, and if I look back, the business allowed us, they set us up, they empowered us to make our decisions, from the board to our management team through our CEO, Kate. They were absolutely instrumental in giving us the flexibility to make the decisions, and they were there to support us. So we didn't have lots of bureaucratic processes, lots and lots of meetings to get decisions made. We had the budget, we had the scope agreed, and we had a steering committee there to support us when we needed it.
Well, you spoke about a few really important things there from your point of view to enable you and the business to have a successful composable transformation. I guess that leads me on nicely to the next question, then, is what are the 3 sort of top tips you'd suggest to any end user that is contemplating making the move composable?
I think 3 top tips. I think, myself and Andy, certainly from our own experience in previous projects, is that given the nature and the flexibility that we've got within MKM and kind of the moving technology with composable commerce is that you just got to kind of make sure that do you need it? And I think you can ask yourself the question, do you want some flexibility? You might want to change something out in the future. So if you've got building blocks, you could maybe swap out your search and CMS and put something else in later. If you've got a roadmap that might dictate that, you could set yourself up like that. But we were fairly sure we knew what we needed. But we also wanted to have the flexibility to kind of plug in, best in class CMS and search, best in class kind of front end, and then having a really solid platform and big commerce to hook all of that stuff into. So we were trying to take the best of breeds from different areas. And I think that's what drove us in that way. And I think the big tip as well is make sure that these companies, or at least two of them, have worked together before. They collaborate. They've got similar roadmaps, or at least they talk to each other about the roadmaps. And we found certainly from a Bloomreach and a big commerce perspective, along with View Storefront, these guys are speaking to each other and they constantly speak to each other. So I think it's good to kind of look at that and also consider SIs that are already partners of one or two of these companies as well, because they've worked together before. They've kind of been through the hard miles. They've learned the lessons. So I think, really pay attention to the products you're selecting, the partners, and then certainly if you're using an SI that's worked with these guys before, or at least a couple of them.
Okay, and I think that can be where many maybe face a challenge, because there are so many products. Those products are also expanding on a monthly or quarterly basis, which does make it slightly tougher. And I guess ultimately they all have a sales team which says their product is the best product for what they're looking for. Did you have any specific way in differentiating which products were best for your business? Was there like a grading system, or how did you go around it?
Without kind of going into all the detail in it, but we looked at a number of platforms. So I think we looked at a number of kind of big commerce competitors as well. And there was some of the stuff was quite close on the scoring. So we kind of looked at that. We looked at, the SIs as well that worked with these guys, and we kind of assessed them and we scored them. And you looked a lot at the people you met, the cultures of the company, the sizes of the companies. And we kind of felt we picked a combination of people that could work with our culture as well in MKM. I think we were fairly set on our kind of search and merch and kind of CMS setup in Bloomreach. We did look at a few others, but I think we kind of looked at that specifically, and then we looked at the platforms that kind of provide your ordering and checkout functionality. And View Storefront came a little bit later down the line, actually, on the front end. That actually probably came more at the tail end, certainly of the RFP and the final decisions that we made in discovery. And that was an introduction through our SI as well, as that would get us to market quicker and could fit our model. And that's kind of how it's worked out.
So I think the important point you mentioned there, that at least that I took anyway, is that it's about being able to work with the SI. Do they fit how you want to work as a business? Are they culturally ran similar in a similar way? Sorry, I think that's and for me it's really important.
Not just to the SI, to the other partners, because the great thing about our setup is that the SI wasn't there to shield us from all the different partners. I had governance set up that the partners were on the same calls. So if we needed to cut through stuff or make decisions, we were all collaborating together in front of MKM. So, I set up governance that allowed that to happen, but the SI worked a lot behind the scenes doing the dev with these partners anyway, and I didn't need to get involved in a lot of the technical detail, and my team didn't. And only if they needed some big decisions, they needed that. But running your program and running your traditional risks and issues and milestones and, testing and getting everybody aligned, I'd certainly recommend that you take a massive active interest in that. And that's where me and my team and I kind of set ourselves up. Again, not heavy governance, but there, and we had senior stakeholders from each of these organisations on a regular steer call to allow us to kind of chart progress together and collaboratively kind of get smashed through the kind of issues and risks if we had any. So yeah, it's all about collaborative working. I know it's easy to say, but it's picking the right cultures and companies to work with that match your ideals.
I mean, I would agree. I think that the whole communication piece from an internal and external and combined point of view is absolutely fundamental to any project being delivered successfully, as well as on time and everything else. So that's yeah, really good to know. Thanks for sharing. So moving on to the next question then. So slightly different one here. Then, in your opinion, what, if any, type of end customer maybe shouldn't consider moving Composable?
It's a great question. I I think it could be accessible for all, to be honest with you.
Okay.
I don't see any reason why you wouldn't consider it. And I suppose I'm not comparing like for like. It was a number of years to my previous wee platform that was more kind of monolithic setup, and Composable's come along. But being through the journey I've been through with this, I'm not sure if size and scale comes into it or not, to be honest with you. It might be just the flexibility you want to have with your tech stack. It might be best in breed technology that you want from different firms. Or you might just go, listen, one firm can give us it all, and that's what I want. We've got no issue dealing with multiple parties. It doesn't scare me. We've got a good SI that can kind of pull people together as well if it's needed. But some people like the simplicity of just having one supplier and they can deal with it. And there's no right or wrong.
Mm.
But I certainly wouldn't let it put you off just because you've got multiple parties. You pick a good SI that can kind of help glue it together.
Would you say, I mean, often in conversations, people have said that maybe smaller businesses that have a smaller technology team or maybe a smaller digital maturity or not so much internal funding, maybe would be better off looking at a single platform provider, because the costs associated with going Composable may be too high to stomach. What would your thoughts be around that?
Yeah, again, it all comes down to the commercials and the products that you pick. Um, it's a great question, and I don't think there's a right. I'm not trying to get out answering this one, but I'm not sure there's a right or a wrong. And I think you've got to find out the facts first. You can look at Composable, stack up the licensing cost versus one supplier that gives you it all, and make a decision. But sometimes you better find out some of the facts and comparing it. I kind of get the logic that maybe a smaller business picks a simpler system because you don't need anything complex. So yeah, you might just go for a single kind of setup as an e-commerce solution. You can get a lot off the shelf products out there. Just cut your cloth. But I think based on our size of business and based on our projected growth, I think what we do is we've looked at this as us putting in the foundations of the house. There's so many other things we could do with this website. It's still in its infancy. There's still a lot of stuff that we can and will do to it. But we've put foundations in to allow us to grow in the future. And that's what it gives us. It gives us that flexibility to grow the site, and not be solely reliant on one supplier's roadmap.
Yeah, okay. And ultimately, that's the aim of the whole piece of going Composable, right? Is
Yeah.
is not being reliant on a single vendor and having the flexibility to chop and change and be
Yeah.
best of breed in whatever area you want to be in.
Absolutely. And I think at the end of the day, I'm not going to say it's as simple as you've just implemented a search and merch system and you just unplug it and put another one in and you do it within a week. I'm not sure it's ever as simple as that.
If
Lots
only.
of people will tell you things are plug and play. They're never plug and play. A lot of them, you have to actually wire them up and plumb them up and kind of merge it with your own business model and the complexity of your own business. And that can be the challenge. In MKM, we've got, I'd say, a complex pricing model and the flexibility of our products. And lots of businesses will say they've got their own complexities. So, yeah.
Okay. So, you just spoke about maybe some types of business that may be exempt. In your opinion, there are very few, and actually think it's a very good reason to go Composable. But I guess that leads on to the next question then, in terms of what would be the biggest upside for an end customer if they were to move Composable?
Biggest upside, I think I can only compare it in my kind of career experience and what I've learned from this. But I genuinely think it does and will give you flexibility in the future. I think it allows you to pick best in breed products, because you can get companies that will say they'll do everything brilliantly, but you do have companies that specialize in search and merch. You have companies that, you know, are experts in providing kind of front end technology for your website. And you've got companies that are experts in giving you the base platform, API based, to hook in whatever you want. So yeah, it's an interesting one. Go and just remind me of the question.
What is the biggest potential upside for an end customer to move Composable? So flexibility is kind of what you said.
It gives you the flexibility to kind of hook together best in breed products.
That's what it says on the tin.
Yeah.
I guess on that note, then you spoke a couple of times today about the plumbing it in piece, which is obviously one of, if not the most important part of all of it, is not just having these different softwares, but all of them working together. Now, you also mentioned earlier that it's not quite as straightforward as many might say it to be. So, if there was, I guess, one word of advice or one tip you could share with anyone that was building an internal team that was also looking to go composable, what would you say to them?
Yeah, I think the biggest tip I would give is that, you know, once you're sure and you've been through your RFP process and you've picked the right partners, is really invest time up front to understand each other, and the kind of, not the limitations of the products, but for them to understand your business and your model. We did that, but we still missed a couple of things. But to be fair, because it was being done for the first time, you can't always get everything out, let's say, in a 7 or 8 week discovery phase. And I think I would invest in time up front to do a discovery phase. And I think the biggest tip is, if you pick the right partner, they'll do the right thing by you. They'll call it out and say, this bit's not right. We're going to have to spend X weeks refactoring to get it right, because it's going to cost you more later if we don't do it now. And I think it's just having that honesty and transparency in a project team that's prepared to do that.
Okay.
And I think, to be fair to myself, my team MKM, and, you know, and the way we were set up governance wise and supported by our board and steerco, is that we provided that environment to allow our SIs and partners to work in that way. Nobody was scared to highlight stuff, you know, and that just comes organically with building trust in your teams. I think the other thing is, now that we're out of the COVID world, well, we're not fully out of it, but do you know what I mean, with regards to, we're not all kind of working fully remotely, is invest face time during these phases with workshops, get the team knowing each other.
I think that is certainly a hot topic at the minute, and that is how businesses can get that face time. There's almost every conversation I'm having right now is what are our competition doing? How are companies getting people back in the office? What's going on? What's the policy here? How's our policy fare with the market? So it's a big topic, and not just for cultural reasons, but for, like you said, for situations like this when shit hits the fan basically, and you need to pull through together. When you know the person that's sat next to you that's also in the same situation as you,
exactly,
you kind of find that extra 110%.
Yeah, and I can't believe I didn't answer this one earlier. And it's only when I'm kind of talking to you about this, is that, you know, Andy and I have a bit, you know, we talk back, you know, sometimes you say you couldn't write a book on some of the things you go through in a project, but, you know, we had a lot of these, our partners had resources in Ukraine when the conflict broke out. And it was unbelievable and humbling, actually, to how a lot of the companies were dealing with their staff. I'm not going to go into all the ins and outs of what they all said and did, but it was amazing to see and witness, and the way we kind of worked through everything and supported each other through that period. We had that in the middle of a project, as, you know, lots of other people did, but we were dealing with people who were in PM, you know, when things were happening. And, you know, the companies stood by the resources, they organised lots of stuff, and got involved in, you know, some humanitarian efforts and so on. So it was a really interesting time, you know, and it puts everything into perspective when things like that happen. But yeah, hats off to our partners and how they dealt with stuff.
There's a huge tech community in Ukraine in particular, and actually it was really, really humbling and really nice to see everyone coming together to help out in obviously what was an awful situation.
All our partners that I named were doing stuff.
Nice.
That was in the middle of the project, and not all in the middle of kind of refactoring when we hit some major issues and everything. But it puts things into perspective. But the teams all worked closely with each other, and we got live on the 31st of August last year, which was a deadline.
And that speaks volumes, going back to the whole cultural piece that you spoke about earlier on in the conversation. So moving on, we 2 questions to go. This one is your thoughts on the applicability of composable architecture to other areas than e-commerce.
Yeah, it's a great question. I've not really thought about that one before, but I suppose my initial reaction is why not?
Yeah. It would make sense if you believe in the principle of being able to have the composable element to the different technologies or vendors you're working with. Then why not? Like you said,
it happens in all other walks of life, not just technology. If you're building houses, building buildings, you bring the best products together and you piece them together. You use people that work together. So why would it just be for kind of e-commerce sites? There's got to be other applications for it. It's a great question. It's not one I've really thought about before, but I would kind of go, why not?
Yeah, well, perhaps that's where we will see things going. I've already heard talk of breaking down like your ERP, which is obviously a mammoth piece of work ahead. So let's see how things develop over the next couple of years. But it sounds like it's going to keep people like you and me in a job. Cool.
Everything goes in cycles in life, doesn't it? But right now, it's certainly composable.
Exactly that. We'll be doing the monolith podcast in 2 or 3 years. Cool. And then the last question then, Craig, from my side is, what would your final thoughts be on how the next 2 years will look in the composable space?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I mean, there's obviously robotic process automation and then Gen AI to play a kind of large part. How AI and everything all plays out in this space, I don't know. But it will certainly have an influence. I think social and mobile commerce, transacting at the edge is going to become mainstream. Certainly with Gen Z and Gen Alpha. TikTok's a search engine for lots of people. Composable solutions probably need to lean into that if they're not already starting to do that. I think retailers exploring multiple digital channels. Composable commerce needs to adapt fully to support the shift. I think also the ease of setting up e-commerce websites will see a rise in younger entrepreneurial generations, turning their passions or hobbies into pure play businesses and disrupting the old guard. So there's a whole load of stuff. I think composable commerce will help blur the lines between online and bricks and mortar shopping, as well as enhancing in-store shopping experience. And I think I touched on this earlier. I think partners continually to work together on joint roadmaps will be absolutely key with that in regards to plugins and marketplaces and so on. You see that already, with lots of providers that they've got X amount of plugins and X amount of partners that allow everybody to plug into each other's systems. That's definitely a massive thing.
Okay. You mentioned a lot of points there. I think something I'd just like to delve into in a little bit more detail is the blurring of online and in-store shopping. Something that a number of people discuss when it comes to how this may look in a couple of years, and maybe how retail will look in the future as well, and maybe having an experience. But are you able to share anything around what you're doing to enhance that at MKM?
I think all I can share just now, and just still at some of the basics, is that we're working on a roadmap to help us try and replicate where it makes sense the in-branch experience. But it's very difficult to kind of do that fully online. But we are certainly looking to enhance our product to make it a lot easier for the trade to use. But with a builders merchants, a lot of builders, a lot of people go into branch, they speak to people and they buy our products. We're not trying to replace that or take that out. We're trying to complement it. And it's finding that, the kind of, I suppose, what's the word I'm looking for? There's got to be, it's not a pivot point, but it's kind of that sweet spot And I think we can do a bit more online to kind of get there.
Okay. But I mean, as you said, the nature of the industry you guys operate in, there's always going to be a very, very heavy in-store
Yeah,
presence.
yeah,
However, that there is always opportunity and there's always things that can be tweaked. And I think that one of the advantages that you guys have is making this transition. You've got best of breed in all different areas. You've got an internal team to manage that yourself. You can be flexible, you can be agile, you can adapt to changes, and you can really have the technology stack to suit your demands now, as well as how the business grows over the next sort of 12, 24, 36 months.
yeah.
So nice. Well, best of luck with that one. Yeah, look, thanks for joining us. Um, Before we do go, for those that are listening, please do like, share, and review how you found the podcast on your desired channel, whether that's Apple, Spotify, or YouTube. The aim of this is to educate those considering the move to composable commerce, as well as the wider audience that are within the retail sector. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you soon.